last verse is the one I want to focus on the most in this message, what time that I have this morning. It said, He supplies. Now, who is this He? Well, we know that's God. God supplies. Now, I've asked myself the question, that's referring to seed. God supplies seed. I've asked myself the question, well, how much seed does God provide? One time, when I was living in Oregon, pastoring a little church in eastern Oregon by the name of Fossil, there was this Methodist church a couple of blocks from the Assembly of God church where I was pastoring. And the pastor there told me once, he says that he believed that a person ought to give 10% to God, 10% for savings, and 80% to live on. And so that means you're sowing 20%, 10% for spiritual harvest, and 10% for a financial harvest. 20%. Now, I've tried to find a scripture that would fit this. You know, it's not really right for preachers to figure out what they're going to say and then look for a scripture that will support what the preacher says. It should be that we should read the Word, and then what we say should match what the Word says. But I was looking for a scripture that would say, well, 20% is what should be invested. And I found one. Anybody know where it's at? Can you think of where it says, talk about 20% in the Bible? You know, it was said by, it became political. I won't go there. Maybe I better keep quiet on that. But it was Joseph. Joseph, the one that had spent his days in prison, and the king brought him out to interpret a dream, and God gave him that spiritual insight in how to, what the dream meant. And then God gave him, apparently it came from the Lord, the wisdom on how to solve the problem. 7 cows, 7 years. 7 years of feast, 7 years of famine. The cornfield, 7 years good crop, 7 years withered and nothing. 7 years of feast in Egypt and 7 years of famine. And the word that came from Joseph's mouth was, appoint someone that will be a tax collector, and that he'll go and he'll collect 20% of all the harvest of the grain in the land of Egypt. And he'll store it away in the cities. And then when the 7 bad years come, there'll be provision laid up for the people. Now, I don't know if we could tie those together or not, but the point is this. God supplies seed. He supplies the seed that is to be sown. But let's go on. That verse also says that, and bread for food. Sometimes we get this confused. The difference between seed and bread. Now, the men will grind the seed, make flour, and the ladies, they'll bake the bread. When I was growing up in Minnesota, my dad used to plant about an acre of potatoes. And every summer we just had a big crop of potatoes. Fall came, we would dig the potatoes. And when we dug the potatoes, we took the best potato, the smooth ones and the nice sized ones. Not the big ugly ones, not the little shrimp ones, but the best. We took the best and we put in a separate bin in our cellar, and that was our seed potatoes. Come next spring, we would get the very best out and we would plant it in the ground. We wanted to get a good harvest, so we planted good seed. we did not eat the seed potatoes. We only ate the other potatoes. Once we got enough seed, well, then we just kept filling up the bin. We gave the cows the little shrimp ones and the ones that got stabbed with the potato digging fork. Those people who live over in the Klamath Valley know all about potatoes. Is that right, Ted? Yeah. Now I want to talk to fathers. Normally it's the responsibility of the father to take care of the family, take care of his wife, take care of his children. It's up to the fathers to see that there is seed planted in the ground, that there might be a harvest. Now this applies to women as well. We know this is a spiritual principle. This principle not only applies to Christians, but it applies to the people of the world. It applies everywhere. You can't get a crop unless you invest. Unless you invest some seed to the soil. Now, my answer on how to get rich. Now I'm speaking in the natural realm. You know as well as I know that spiritual riches are far more valuable than financial riches. But I told you how to get rich, and some of you believed that I was talking about natural, financial riches. So I got to hold to my word. How you are to get rich financially. You need to invest. Remember we talked about 10% for the Lord and 10% for savings? Well, that 10%, if you invested 10% in your salary every month, or every time you get paid, if you put it in savings, or invested in a business, or invested in stocks and bonds, or buy gold and silver, or invest it some way, if you invest it consistently, it'll build up. The interest will compound. And before time goes by, you'll be wealthy. Now, I heard of this principle back from that preacher in Oregon. But I had 5 kids, and I didn't see how I could save 10%. I always gave the Lord his 10%. So, you see, I'm not rich. I didn't follow my own advice, or the advice that I got. It's so important that you invest in something, and it multiplies, it grows, it compounds, and you won't be in poverty. You see, what we do is we confuse the seed with the food, the bread to eat. Now there's a man by the name of Kiyosaki, a Hawaiian, Japanese Hawaiian, I presume, wrote a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the poor dad in that book was his earthly, physical father. The rich dad was the father of a friend of his.